What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 4 deadline. So I'm going to go through the latest press conference information, answer some of your questions, and take a quick look at my team as well. Just to let you know, this video has been sponsored by UEFA. Champions League is back next week. So is Champions League Fantasy. You can sign up to play for free right now using the link in the description below. More on that to come later. So let's start with Man City, because there's been a lot of discussion over the last day or so about whether or not Erling Haaland will start against Brentford at home in Game Week 4. For anyone that hasn't seen, someone close to Haaland sadly passed away. And to be honest with you, it feels weird to even speculate about FPL minutes over something like this. But given that everyone is talking about it and Pep Guardiola addressed it in his press conference today, we'll just quickly go into it, right? So Pep said it was a tough moment for him, obviously talking about Haaland and his family. It was sad news. Our thoughts are with him and his family. We will see tomorrow if he is mentally and physically able to play. So as is right in this situation, the club presumably are leaving it up to Haaland, and everyone deals with these things in different ways. And I don't think anyone would feel any different about Haaland if he decided he didn't want to play. Is he going to play in Game Week 4? I would probably say yes. I'm just not convinced that he will miss out because of this. I think something similar happened with Haaland maybe last season as well, and he was in the lineup the next game. I just think when he's fit and available, if he wants to play, which obviously we don't have any insight into, but if he does want to play, he'll be in that 11. So I just think he'll be in the lineup against Brentford at home, and this probably shouldn't change our FPL decisions too much. If you've got Haaland and Salah and you want to play it ultra safe, then of course you captain Salah. But for me, for example, if I want to get Salah in, I would have to take a hit. And I don't think the information we have right now is enough for me to take that hit. It is slightly more tempting, but I'm probably not going to do it. So that's all we have on Haaland. I don't want to speculate any more than that. I think he will start. Can I guarantee that? Of course not. Pep also said that Rodri and Foden are doing well in training. It wouldn't be a surprise to see Rodri back in against Brentford, get him some game time before Arsenal at home in Game Week 5. Foden, I'm less sure about where he's going to fit in, and I definitely wouldn't buy him right now, but we can wait and see over the next couple of weeks. And then he also said that Nathan Ake will be out until after the next international break. So if you've got Vardiol, he's pretty much nailed, I would say, for at least the next 4. And as part of that, you've got Brentford at home this week and Fulham at home in Game Week 7, which look like decent fixtures. Some people replied to my tweet about this saying that Rico Lewis could play left back and Walker could play right back. And of course that's possible. I highly doubt it's going to happen though. Because if Walker comes in, then you've got Vardiol who can play that more attacking position on the left. I don't think you need to force Rico Lewis as a left back. And Pep likes a left footer over there, which Vardiol is. So I suspect that Vardiol will just be in the team for the next 4 game weeks. That's Man City. So let's talk about Brighton next. Gjertsås held his press conference on Thursday, and the player that people really want to know about is João Pedro. So I saw this article in the Argus. So Julio Enciso and João Pedro cannot train with the squad on Thursday after returning from South America. The pair were in opposition in Paraguay in a game which ended at 3:30 a.m. on Wednesday. That's UK time, right? So they were playing until quite late. And obviously the game against Ipswich is on Saturday. Gjertsås said, I think we have a great medical department who will do everything for the regeneration of the players. Also the players themselves, they are professional enough to know that they have to be fully recovered for Saturday. Of course they can't train today, that's Thursday, with the team, but they will be back on the training ground. Then it is about giving them a good recovery and hopefully they can train tomorrow, and then of course they are part of the squad. Now personally, and maybe I'm just a hopeful João Pedro owner, but I think he'll start. They played in a game that ended at 3:30 a.m. on Wednesday. They're back on Thursday in Brighton, although they're not in training. Presumably they're going to train on Friday. And as long as they're fit enough, they'll be available to play on Saturday. So I think João Pedro has been quite important to Brighton so far, and he will start, but he'll probably come off early. I don't think we're going to get another 90-minute game out of him. If you want to play it ultra safe, and you're making a pick from Brighton for just 2 game weeks before wildcarding in Game Week 6, Danny Welbeck's maybe a little bit safer, just in case João Pedro doesn't start or he comes off early. But I think if you're making a pick on, say, wildcard, for example, and you're looking to keep this Brighton player a little bit longer, I think it's got to be João Pedro. From the first 3 games, we've seen that his minutes are better. He either starts as number 10 or finishes the game as a number 9. He's probably on penalties as well. Long-term pick, it's got to be João Pedro. If I was going for 2 weeks only, I still think I'd pick João Pedro, even though you could maybe argue that Welbeck is a little bit safer. Just a little bit more from Brighton. Kadioglu told the Argus this week that he was fit and ready for action after a minor injury. Asked today, again on Thursday, whether he could be set for his debut this weekend, Gjertsås replied with a laugh and said it might be a possibility, yes. Now, I think he's quite interesting because he's only 4.5 million. I think people rate him quite highly. I think there could be a bunch of attacking returns there. He can play more advanced as well, possibly. But I suspect he's coming in to play at right back. There's probably not a need to rush into him. And if you're buying a Brighton defender this week, it should probably just be Lewis Dunk or even maybe Van Heck for Ipswich at home and Forest at home. But long term, if we see Kadioglu play regularly at 4.5 million, he could become a little bit of a bargain, especially when Brighton's fixtures get better. But on the João Pedro front, he's almost certainly going to be available. Will he start? I wouldn't guarantee it, but I think he will. So just a quick reminder that the UEFA Champions League is back next week, and so is Champions League Fantasy. The deadline to submit your team for match day 1 is 5:45 PM UK time on the 17th of September, which is next Tuesday, and it's completely free to play. You just need to click that link in the description below to get signed up. There's a bunch of prizes on offer too, such as PlayStation 5s, tickets to the Champions League final next year, match balls, shirts, and more. I'm going to be playing this season. I'm going to show you my team in just a second, but if you think you can beat me, make sure to join the Let's Talk FPL mini league by using the code on screen or the link in the description. So this is the team that I've gone with at the moment, but keep in mind that you can make unlimited transfers right up until that deadline next Tuesday, so play around with different player combinations. Also in Champions League Fantasy, you can switch your captain every day within a match day until you get a score that you're happy with, and you can make substitutions as well. So on my bench, I've got Kabasi, Jamal and Rafinha, all from Barcelona, and they don't play until the 19th of September, which is the Thursday. So if any players on Tuesday or Wednesday in my 11 don't do well, I will bring those Barcelona players on. And Kabasi in particular looks pretty decent value at 4.5 million. And the fixtures early on for Barcelona are good. They got Monaco away in match day 1. Then it's Young Boys in match day 2. Bayern Munich at home is a little bit more difficult in match day 3, but the rest of the fixtures are pretty good. So I definitely keep an eye on Barcelona players. And in terms of captaincy, I've got to have some big hitters in there. So Mbappe is in for 11 million euro, Stuttgart at home, match day 1. And if on Tuesday he doesn't do well, I'm going to switch to Haaland, right? I feel like I've got to have him because Man City's fixtures pretty much the whole way through are great. Their toughest game is probably PSG away in like match day 7, but you get 2 transfers every match day. So if I don't want Haaland at that point, then I can just get rid of him. But for now, I definitely want him in. Just some other players that I've got in the team. Trent's in, 6 million from Liverpool. We haven't seen him deliver attacking returns in the Premier League yet, but I'm sure they're coming. And Liverpool's fixtures all the way through are pretty decent. So I wanted at least one Liverpool player in. I couldn't fit Mo Salah in with the structure that I've gone with. Bryan Gil at Girona has played every game so far in the league and only 4.5 million. So I'm hoping he's pretty good value as well. I'm definitely going to play around with this over the weekend, but that's how it looks at the moment. There's good value players in there. I've still got my heavy hitters, and I'm going to hope that Rico Lewis continues to be in the first 11. The biggest mistake I would say with this team is not having 3-Man City, because the fixtures are just that good, and they're going to be one of the strongest teams in the Champions League. But I'll fix that over the weekend. Let me know below what your teams are looking like. Don't forget to join my mini league as well. Links in the description. But get signed up ahead of that deadline next week, 5:45 PM UK time on the 17th of September. Make sure you're in. See if you can beat me. So for Arsenal, we've been waiting for an update on Martin Odegaard, who went off injured during the international break for Norway. And as expected, we don't really have confirmation either way. We don't know if he's available for Spurs away or not. And if he's not, how long he's going to be out for. And I'm never really too sure what to make about what Arteta says in press conferences, but this is what he did say. He needs more tests on his ankle injury. He is super positive about everything, but we have to wait and see. And then there was a follow-up question which said, you are not ruling him out of Sunday, so that's game week 4. And Arteta said, players with 48 hours are always available, but let's see what happens. Now, in the past, Arteta hasn't necessarily always been forthcoming with news. And based on what he said before, I would read this as he already knows he's out. He just doesn't want to say it because he wants Spurs to have to prepare thinking that Odegaard could play. Now, I might be wrong. Maybe he is genuinely close to being available, but I suspect he's going to be out. But how long for, I just do not know. And we've already discussed this week about what that means for the likes of Havertz and Saka. I still think Havertz is a perfectly good option this week. I still think game week 6 and 7, even if Odegaard was still missing, look great for Arsenal. It wouldn't put me off having their players, but I can't give you any more information than what we already discussed because Arteta is just not going to give us that info. Even on Havertz, right? I've speculated that maybe he could play deeper, but he could still play as a number 9. Arteta said that Gabriel Jesus trained today, hoping to do so tomorrow to be in the squad for Spurs, but it doesn't mean he will start. So maybe it'll be Trossard that plays 9, maybe Havertz will still play there. Maybe Odegaard will turn up because it's such a big match. We just don't know. But if I had Odegaard, I would definitely sell him because I think there is quite a likelihood that he will miss out. And also the fixtures just aren't that great in the next 2 anyway, right? Like Spurs away is fine, but there's a doubt there. And then it's Man City away in game week 5. On Saka, this wouldn't push me into selling him for Salah, but if I had the free transfer to do it, I absolutely would. And I would do that whether or not Odegaard was available. And on Havertz, you're not buying him anyway. And if you've got him, he's still fine to play against Spurs away. So I don't think it changes too much. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult for those on Wildcard, but not massively. And then just on Calafiori, Arteta said they have to wait on it. So we don't know how long he's going to be out for. Probably not a massive concern for FPL at the moment, but it does mean the likes of, well, Saliba's always nailed, and I think Ben White is as well. But Gabriel's going to keep playing. It's just going to be that left-back spot that changes around a little bit. But presumably Timber will be in that role. So yeah, unfortunately, that's all I can give you on Arsenal. So there's good news from Aston Villa. Unai Emery has confirmed both Ollie Watkins and Ezri Konsa are available for selection and will be in the Aston Villa squad to face Everton at home in game week 4, which is nice if you own both of those players. On Konsa, he went off injured while playing for England during the international break, but it didn't look that bad. So I would expect him to be straight in the Aston Villa team if he's available. I don't think he's the kind of player that they would leave out. So if you've got him, I think there's a pretty good shot at a clean sheet against Everton at home. So if you were planning on playing him, I still would do that. With Ollie Watkins, we've seen reduced minutes so far. He hasn't made it past 70 minutes in any of the 3 games he's played. He's not a bad transfer in. Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away are good fixtures. He's not a bad option to include on Wildcard either. But I don't think, given what we've seen so far, I'd be rushing out to get him. Because there is a chance that, of course, he will start. I think most of us would expect that anyway. But he could go off early again, especially with Champions League starting from next week, as we've already mentioned. So I think with a fixture run, Watkins is still good. But I wouldn't be as confident about him as an FPL option as I would have been in pre-season, right, before we saw the early substitutions and Duran doing well. But overall, for Aston Villa, good news they're both in the squad. I would expect both of them to start. Let's talk about Spurs next. Ange Postecoglou has given pretty positive updates about both Mickey van der Ven and Dominic Solanke ahead of the North London derby. So this is what he said about van der Ven. It's fairly positive. Mickey's good. He's trained all the way through the international break, and it was good for him to stay with us to build him back up so he's ready to go. So that's a positive for Spurs defence overall. And for anyone that's kind of torn between playing Porro or someone else, and there's a question about this later on, this just pushes Porro even more as a better option this week. It's still going to be really difficult to get a clean sheet against Arsenal, but if you're on the fence about it, maybe Mickey van der Ven being fit is reason enough alone to go for Porro. On Solanke, he said Dom's improved as well and trained the back half of this week. So he hasn't been training the whole international break. We still have 2 days to go with these guys. So hopefully they get through training okay and are available. So Solanke's not guaranteed to be fine, but that sounds pretty positive. I suspect at this point not many people have kept hold of Solanke. But if you have, it's probably worth holding him a little longer. Even if you've got 8 good attackers and you're going to bench him against Arsenal, Brentford at home in game week 5 is pretty decent. Like, I'm probably going to keep Haaland the whole way through. But one transfer I've thought of in game week 5 is Haaland out to fund the move for Saka to Salah. And it would probably be for Watkins. But Solanke, if he's fit against Brentford, is another player that I would consider. So if you're in a position where you've had to make a different transfer already, you don't have a spare one, I'd probably think that Solanke will be in that team because they're a better side with him. And obviously that Arsenal game is massive. So if he's available, I suspect that he will be in that team. Even more so because Richarlison is ruled out. So he said Richie's still got a bit of work to do alongside Will Lancashire, who is still in rehab. So it doesn't look like Richarlison's going to be there. Of course, Kulusevski can play as a 9. Son can play there as well. But I think if Solanke's fit, he's going to be in. So it's good news if you kept hold of him. And I suspect a lot of people have sold him anyway, so it probably doesn't matter actually. So there wasn't a huge amount about specific players in the Liverpool press conference, but Arne Slot did touch on rotation, which a few people asked me about. So on the upcoming run of 7 games in 3 weeks and whether he will rotate his team, this is what he said. That's something that I decide before every game. My former teams, we were actually able to play almost every game with the same players, but it's a different league. I might have to adjust to that, but it also depends on what they show, and by what they show I mean in terms of physique. In the first 3 games we were in a really strong physique, but we only played 1 game each 7 days. Now they have a point to prove, and I assume that they all want to play every game. And he went on to say, so if they want to, they have to show up every time, also in quality, but especially in work rate. We have more than 11 very good players that I can use more. I can't tell you now if I am going to do so or not, that I am going to decide before every game that comes up. I get some feedback from medical staff, performance staff, whoever they are, about what's the best thing to do, and we make the decision before every game. So I don't think this is anything we weren't really expecting. Any team that's in Europe, especially Champions League and stuff like that, there's likely to be more rotation than there was for the first 3 games. Now, players like Salah are probably absolutely fine. Same with Van Dijk and Alisson. But, you know, Tsimikas as a backup for Robertson, Conor Bradley for a backup for Trent, Gakpo on the left instead of Diaz, Nunez in the middle instead of Jota. They are players that we should probably expect to see more minutes over the coming weeks. And that doesn't mean they're going to start. It might just mean earlier substitutions, but we need to keep an eye on it. For most people, I don't think this really affects too many decisions over the next couple of weeks, because either you've got your Liverpool players in already, in which case you're not selling them. If you're looking to buy the likes of Jota or Diaz, maybe now is not the right time to do it, but it depends who you're leaving out. So, for example, if it was Diaz versus Jota versus Eze, I would just take Eze. But maybe if it's a different player, like Gordon versus Diaz or Jota, you would probably still just go for the Liverpool player because of the fixtures they've got. But I guess what I'm trying to say is most people already have the Liverpool players they're going to buy, unless it's Salah, in which case he's still a great option. So I wouldn't panic. If I was on Wildcard, I probably would prefer double defence over attack anyway, like I spoke about in the previous video. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things that Slot talked about as rotation, but it's not really news because we kind of realised this was likely to happen. And I just think we'll see earlier substitutions, which could be frustrating, by the way. Even if the likes of Jota keep starting, if he's only going to play like 60, 65 minutes, that's not ideal. But let's see what happens. It might be that he keeps playing 70 plus, and I'm sure the returns are coming. I know some Jota owners aren't that happy he's only got 2 returns in the first 3, but it ain't that bad, and he's had chances, and if he keeps starting, he will do well. So I wouldn't panic on your Liverpool players just because of what Slot has said, but obviously rotation could happen more often now than it did in the first 3 weeks. So I thought this was pretty interesting from the Crystal Palace press conference. Glasner was talking about Nketiah, and this is what he said. Yes, he's ready to start. Otherwise, we wouldn't have spent about £25 million. We don't spend £25 million for a player to be on the bench. He can play different positions. He's very smart. He has a different profile to Jean-Philippe. So obviously that's Mateta. Now, does this mean we should rush out and buy Nketiah? Well, he is only 5.9 million, so you can add him to the list of the many cheap forwards that we have available in FPL at the moment. And he does have Leicester at home. So for those FPL managers out there that like taking a punt and getting on a player early, Nketiah's ownership is really low. It's 2 home games back-to-back, Leicester at home, Man United at home. It could be worth the punt. Now, where exactly is he going to play? Don't know. How is he going to fit in? Not sure. Will he hit the ground running? Maybe. But he has done very well when he's had minutes for Arsenal in the past. Any point in FPL over the last few seasons where we know Nketiah is going to start as the 9, he's been really popular and done really well. It might be that Mateta and Nketiah start together. We'll have to wait and see against Leicester, but that's quite positive. The type of FPL manager I am, I'm more than happy to wait. Right, I've got Haaland, Isak, and I was going to say Jean-Philippe then, João Pedro up front. I don't need to shift any of those players this week. But on Wildcard in Game Week 6, he's definitely someone that I would look at. Now, Crystal Palace's fixtures are not amazing in 6 and 7. And even after that, right, it's a little bit tough. They got Everton away in 6, Liverpool at home in 7, Forest away in 8. And then from 9 onwards, it's Spurs at home, Wolves away, Fulham at home, Villa away, Newcastle home, Ipswich away. It's not a bad run overall. There's a reason that a lot of people have Eze, for example. But at 5.9, that's potentially really good value. So like I said, if you want a bit of a punt this week, go for it. I still, even though Glasner literally said we wouldn't have spent about 25 million to bench him, he could still be on the bench, right? They might introduce him slowly and then have him in the starting lineup after that. But if you like a punt, who knows? He could be good this week. It's someone that I will keep my eye on, definitely not rushing into buying him. All right, let's get into some of your questions. And a lot of people have this dilemma for game week 4. So Gabriel versus Porro, which one to bench? I'm also playing Saka, who's up against Porro. Shall I hedge my bets or go for double Arsenal? Now, it's quite a close call, but in isolation, forgetting about Saka for a second, I think I'd go for Porro. The Arsenal defence is clearly better, generally. We all know that, and I don't think many people would disagree. But if you're ever going to play the Spurs defender, it's when they're at home and Arsenal have got a few key players missing. And I just think that probably puts it slightly to advantage Porro. I don't actually expect a clean sheet from either of these two teams. And Gabriel is a massive threat from set pieces, but we know the kind of positions that Porro picks up in game. I think between the two, I would just play the guy at home. That would be the deciding factor for me. On the Saka point, that is quite interesting because last week I had a similar dilemma in game week 3 between, I think it was Porro and Robinson or something like that. And I didn't play Porro because I had him up against Isak. And I didn't have any attackers playing against Robinson. But it was a little bit different because Porro was away. And I really didn't expect a clean sheet away to Newcastle. I don't expect one against Arsenal either. But I guess the fact they're at home means there's a slightly better chance, possibly, although Arsenal are a better attacking team than Newcastle. So again, it's quite close. I'd be tempted to double down and just go for the high upside play because I don't think there's too much to split Porro and Gabriel this week. That being said, if I'm honest, if I put myself in the shoes of an FPL manager that's got this dilemma and I have both of these players, I'm pretty sure I would just play Saka and Porro because he's at home. Obviously, I know it's impossible, right? If Gabriel and Porro were both away, then I'd probably just play Gabriel. But obviously, that's not the case, right? Porro's at home. So I think I would just still play him either way. But it's a close call. If you want to go for the high upside play or the higher upside play, it's probably double Arsenal. But I'm fairly sure I would just play Saka and Porro if it was me. So the popular transfer this week, is it really worth selling Saka and Isak for Salah and João Pedro, even if it's for free? I think if I had 2 free transfers this week, this is the kind of move that I would be looking to do. I've already got João Pedro, so it's a bit different for my team. But let's say you haven't. I really like it. It's not a no-brainer. I know lots of people have got the opinion that Salah is an absolute must right now. You've got to wildcard, take hits, or do whatever to bring him in. And I don't necessarily agree with that because I think if you've got Haaland, he's a perfectly good captain this week. But being able to do this move for free, I think looks great. Now, are Saka and Isak capable of double-digit hauls against Spurs away and Wolves away? Absolutely. But so are Salah and João Pedro with the fixtures they've got. I guess there's a slight risk with João Pedro's minutes, as we've already discussed, but I think he'll be fine. And the key thing for me is next week, in game week 5, you're probably going to want to captain Salah, right? Haaland's not a problem if you want to go for him, but it is Arsenal at home. And that is one of the toughest fixtures that Man City are going to have this season. Like, it's a home game, so you'd never fully bet against Haaland. But it's not the kind of... If you're ever going to not captain him, that's the fixture not to do it in, is basically what I'm trying to say. And Salah just stands out massively against Bournemouth at home in game week 5. Like Spurs, if Solanke's fit, Son, you could maybe captain one of their players. Cole Palmer's away to West Ham. He's never a terrible option. But for me, the absolute standout that week is Salah. And so to be able to get him in for free this week, when he's got a home game like João Pedro ahead of next week, looks pretty good. Like, sometimes it's worth putting a transfer off because stuff can happen, which means your transfers are better used elsewhere. But I think in this case, even if you don't do it this week, you're going to want to do it next week. Of course, if Salah or João Pedro gets injured, then that would be annoying. But you can't just not make transfers in case players get injured all the time. And Salah and João Pedro's track records are pretty good, especially with Salah, right? We've seen for a long time that he always plays. So I think I would do it. I'm going to have Saka and Isak. I'm absolutely hoping they do really well. And they could outscore Salah and João Pedro. It's possible. But if I was on free hit, I know which combination I would choose. And I would definitely want that combination for game week 5. So I'd probably just do it this week for free. For a hit, probably not. But for free, I think it looks great. So who are the best midfield enablers for Haaland and Salah teams? Rodgers, Semenyo, Smith Rowe or Minter. So let's talk about them individually. With Morgan Rodgers, I think we've all seen him play and been quite impressed. But it's difficult to put out of your mind the fact that he's blanked every game week so far. despite playing 270 minutes. Now, to be fair for Villa, they did play West Ham away and Arsenal at home first 2 game weeks. The really good fixture run for them started game week 3. And yes, he blanked against Leicester as well. But he's probably done enough in the first 3 game weeks to warrant at least 1 assist maybe. I think he's played well enough. So the output hasn't been there. I think there's still question marks over whether it will come. But he is playing as a number 10 for Aston Villa, right? That's got to be quite promising moving forward. And he's the cheapest player on this list. And the fixtures coming up are great. Back-to-back home games against Everton and Wolves, Ipswich away in 6, Man United at home in 7, not that bad. Then Fulham away in 8 and Bournemouth at home in 9. So with the fixture run that Villa have got in his price, I still really like him. But I think for a lot of FPL managers, if he keeps blanking over the next kind of 1 or 2 game weeks, there's going to be big question marks over that. And I don't think people will hold their nerve. So I just maybe keep that in mind. But I still really like him. Second on the list was Semenyo. I actually think for the whole season, Semenyo might be the best option. Like if I had to bet right now who's going to score the most points, it'll probably be Semenyo because I think in that Bournemouth team, you've got a decent attacking side. I think he's absolutely nailed on as well, which maybe you can say about any of the other 3 players. Like Rodgers looks nailed right now, and that will continue as long as he keeps playing well, but it's not a guarantee. Smith Rowe looks like he's got that place on the side. He's going to continue to build up his fitness. He'll probably be fine as well. But with Semenyo, based on what we saw last year and the minutes so far, I think he's absolutely nailed. He's also played 90 minutes every single game, and he's got 3 attacking returns in 3. The problem is the fixture run is not quite so good. So Chelsea at home this week, then Liverpool away. In 6 and 7, it's great. Southampton at home and Leicester away. A lot of people on Wildcard 6 will put Semenyo in. But then it's Arsenal at home, Villa away, City at home. And the fixtures don't get good until, I don't know, like game week 11 onwards again. So I think on Wildcard 6, it'll probably be the case that he'll go in. You might bench him for some more of those difficult fixtures. And then you've got good ones quite close after that. But if you put him in now, you could probably argue that 3 of the next 5 are quite tough. But you're getting the minutes. And I do think that Bournemouth side is good. I think they will cause most teams problems. So Semenyo is one of my favourites for the season, but obviously you're not picking for the season, you're picking for the next few weeks. So in that regard, Rodgers has definitely got the fixtures on him. Smith Rowe, I like him. And I don't want to change my opinion too much because I bought him in game week 3 and he blanked against Ipswich because he did get his goal against Leicester, but the minutes are building up, but he's not a 90-minute man. And Marco Silva has spoken about the fact he needs to build up to be able to physically play, every single week for 80 to 90 minutes. I think his place in the side is fairly safe. Like I wouldn't be worried about his minutes. And the fixtures aren't too bad. West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, Forest away next 3. They do then play City away. But even after that, Villa at home, Everton away, Brentford at home, Palace away, Wolves at home. For an attacker, that's not a bad run. So Smith Rowe's fixtures are pretty good. He doesn't have the minutes like the other 2 right now. But hopefully he'll build that up. I find it quite difficult to analyse Smith Rowe because we just haven't seen him that much over the last few years. Like he definitely showed plenty of signs at Arsenal that he's a really good player, and he's already scored 1 goal in the first 3. We shouldn't forget that. But I want to see him on a continued run. Can he stay fit, and can he keep up that output? Like 1 goal every 3 games, if it's a 10-pointer, probably isn't that bad. But I think he's capable of better. And then with Minter, I think Brighton, probably the best attacking team of the 4 that we're talking about. I guess Villa are up there as well. And actually, I quite like Bournemouth too. So maybe that's a little bit harsh. They've definitely got the best 2 fixtures coming up, right? Brighton. They've got Ipswich at home and Forest at home. But it does get pretty tricky after that. Chelsea away, Spurs at home, Newcastle away. Wolves at home in 9 is fine. But then it's Liverpool away and City at home. Brighton are a good team. And they will cause most of these other teams problems, but that's not a fixture run that I would target. So I don't mind Minter on wildcard in game week 4 to fit in Salah and Haaland, but I think he's someone that you're probably going to want rid of sooner rather than later. And Brighton do have a lot of players. There might be rotation concerns. Now, Minter like João Pedro might be more nailed on than people are giving them credit for. The reality is we don't know that for sure. We would need to see more games before we could be confident of saying that. So to give like a summary, I think Minter's probably the best for the next 2. But I think value-wise and long-term-wise, if I was placing bets on 2 of these players, I'd probably go Rodgers and Semenyo, despite the fixtures. There might be subconsciously me thinking, well, Smith Rowe's just blanked after you bought him in against Ipswich. Maybe he's not so good. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, because Fulham do have better fixtures overall than Bournemouth. But if I had to put my money on long-term bet next 6 to 8 game weeks, I'd probably go Rodgers and Semenyo. But in the short term, they're probably all good. So if you've got a favourite, pick whoever you like. But I think although Rodgers hasn't got the return so far, that little bit of money saving will come in handy later on. So if you still have Quansah in your squad, is it better to start him every week in the hope that he plays? And the idea behind this would be that if he starts for Liverpool, great. Hopefully you get your clean sheet. And if he's on the bench, he won't come on, and therefore someone on your FPL bench can come in instead. The problem with this idea is we've already seen in game week 1 that he got the start and he was subbed at half time. So there is the chance that he'll only get you a 1-pointer. And I'm not saying that will happen every time that he plays, but it does show that Arne Slot is not afraid to make big decisions. And I do think that was quite a big decision. First game for Liverpool in the Premier League, you've picked your centre-back partnership, and you've basically decided at half-time it's not working. And obviously Liverpool went on to do really well in that game. So it was the right call, but it shows that Slot could do that moving forward. And who's to say that he doesn't pick Konate ahead of a Champions League game in the Premier League, but thinks, well, he can't play the full 90, and then he brings Quansah on for a cameo. So I would be not that happy about playing him every week. Now, if you've got a terrible defender that you're having to play instead, and Liverpool have got a good fixture like this week, I may be a bit more tempted to do it, because I think the reality is most times he's going to play and get past 60 minutes, or he's just not going to play at all. So in some cases, it might be worth taking that risk. So I haven't thought of a defender, but let me have a quick look here. Let's say you've got... Who's got a really tough fixture? I don't know, Brentford maybe against Man City away. Like, I wouldn't see a clean sheet for Brentford whatsoever. So maybe if your choice is playing one of them, or just starting Quansah hoping for a clean sheet, or a start even, maybe you just play Quansah. But even then, like, if you've got like a Pinnock or someone, they could go and get you a goal in that 90 minutes that they're definitely going to play. Similar if you've got like Greaves at Ipswich, do you expect a clean sheet against Brighton? Probably not. So maybe this week you start Quansah instead. But like in future weeks, I don't know, let's take game week 5 where Liverpool play Bournemouth. If your dilemma is to start Quansah or like Robinson against Newcastle, I'd probably just take the guaranteed start and the potential for attack and return. So I think based on what's happened so far, and mostly game week 1, I wouldn't be completely happy about just starting him every week, because I think he could come off the bench. I think, like, we don't know basically how Liverpool are going to rotate around Champions League, but we do know from previous seasons it's very unlikely that Konate can play Premier League, Champions League, Premier League, Champions League continuously. At some point, Quansah will have to come in, but I'd want to see that first before I start playing him every single week. But I think with the fixtures they've got in the next 2, you could risk it, but not if you've got a decent enough defender. I would just probably play them instead if they're guaranteed to start. So would you go for a Villa or Brighton defender on Wildcard? Now, I think my quick answer is to say Aston Villa, because if you look at the fixtures over the next 6 game weeks, it's not the perfect run. I certainly wouldn't expect a clean sheet every week, but there's not too many games there where it would be annoying if you had to play a Villa defender. So you've got Everton at home and Wolves at home next 2 game weeks. That's absolutely fine. And then, okay, it's an away game in game week 6, but it is against Ipswich. It's a home game in 7, even though it's Man United. Then you've got Fulham away and Bournemouth at home. Now, I preferably wouldn't plan to play an Aston Villa defender in each of those games, but if I got stuck because of a suspension, an injury, a different transfer that I had to make instead, I wouldn't mind it either. So the next 6 game weeks are definitely better for Aston Villa than they are for Brighton. Now, Brighton's next 2 are great. Ipswich at home and Forest at home. But then you run into Chelsea away, Spurs at home, Newcastle away. I don't see clean sheets in any of those 3 games. And then to be fair, Wolves at home in game week 9 is not that bad. You could argue, based on home games alone, that Brighton are just as good as Aston Villa. It really depends on where you need to play these 2 defenders. But I just think overall, over the next 6 game weeks, I do prefer Aston Villa's fixtures. That being said, I'd probably rate the Brighton defence a little bit better. They don't have Champions League and stuff to contend with either. So a lot of it will just come down to which other defenders you've picked. Okay, so let's say, for example, you're going for Trent, Robertson, and an Arsenal defender, right? Trent and Robertson, you're happy to play every week for the next 4. Arsenal defender, maybe not so much in the next 2, because you've got Spurs away and City away. So potentially you could just go for like a Brighton defender instead, like Lewis Dunk, for Ipswich at home and Forest at home, and then just play your Arsenal defender after that. So it does come down to a little bit of when do I actually need them. So that's something that you'll have to go and plan around. But overall, in isolation, if I'm just comparing one versus the other over the next 6 game weeks, I would probably back Aston Villa slightly. So I'm just going to quickly talk about my team. Nothing much has changed since the team selection video yesterday. The press conferences today haven't really thrown up any chaos. So my plan is still to roll the transfer and then get Salah in game week 5 for free rather than taking a hit to bring him in this week. I've got Dean Henderson in goal for Palace against Leicester at home. Given that Quansah is going to be in the squad for Aston Villa, I'm just going to play him. He's not an exciting pick. I wouldn't expect too many attacking returns or anything like that. But I think it's a pretty good chance at getting a clean sheet against Everton at home. I've still got Robinson in the 11 against West Ham at home, even though I don't think he's going to keep a clean sheet. Before I started recording this video, I actually put Porro in. But when I got that question about Porro versus Gabriel and the fact that the person that asked the question owned Saka, I started thinking about my own team. I've also got Saka. So maybe the higher upside play is to go for Robinson instead. I may switch that because in isolation, I think Porro is probably a little bit better this week. If none of them are going to get a clean sheet, Porro is definitely more attacking. But I'm tempted to go for the defender where I don't have any attackers playing against them. So Quansah and Robinson both in, Trent in as well. No real concerns about him. Slot did mention that he needs to give Connor Bradley minutes and that one of the early substitutions for Trent was because he felt like he looked a bit tired and stuff like that. But he's still going to start. I've got no worries about that, I would say. Eze Leicester at home is my vice captain if Haaland does miss out, but I'm not expecting him to. I think he will play, as I've already mentioned, and he will be my captain. Bruno Fernandes, Southampton away. Fingers crossed he can just get me something. Right now, I would just take one goal. One goal, maybe one bonus point. That will do me. And then I've got Saka, Spurs away. And I think I'm going to play Rodgers against Everton at home rather than Smith Rowe, just because of the minutes that Rodgers keeps getting. I think Smith Rowe is fine, and I've got no issues with playing him whatsoever this week. But I just think maybe Rodgers is a little bit better. João Pedro, I think he's going to start, as I've already mentioned. Great fixture. And then Isak is my other player in the 11. I think outside of Salah, this team looks really good. Of course, Diaz and Jota are brilliant options as well. And they're home to Forest, which is probably better than Southampton away. But Fernandes is going to play the full game. He's on penalties. I don't think he's a worse option than Jota or Diaz. It's just Salah that I'm missing. So I could have Salah and Welbeck instead of Saka and Isak. I could have Salah and Mitoma instead of Fernandes and Saka, but I just don't think it's worth a hit. So I think I'm just going to go with this team, roll the transfer for the first time this season, and just rely on my squad. If someone misses out, I've got Smith Rowe and Porro on the bench, and Barco just doesn't really matter. So I think I'm looking pretty good. I'm just going to hold it, apart from Salah. I'm going to hold it like that, and that's it. Captain Haaland. He's probably going to start, hopefully another hat-trick. Let's see how it goes. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. And of course, don't forget to play Champions League Fantasy, which is starting next week on Tuesday. You can click that link in the description below to get signed up and make your team ahead of next week's deadline. Otherwise, I will catch you on the deadline stream tomorrow.